Good evening, welcome. Welcome to the September 3rd edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. Glad you've joined us tonight. If you're watching the TV, welcome to you as well. As is our tradition, we'll begin this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rose, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Here.
Commissioner Glover,
Here.
Commissioner Tully, Commissioner Davenport.
Here.
Mr. Tully is out of the country tonight. I'm sure he wishes he could be with us, and he will be next week. Is there a motion concerning electronic participation?
Mayor, I move to allow electronic participation for the September 3rd, 2024 Village Council meeting.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose,
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Aye.
Commissioner Davenport,
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Aye.
Mayor Barnett.
Aye. Danny, you're welcomed unanimously.
Thanks, guys.
Hope you feel better soon. Item 3 on our agenda tonight, proclamations. We do not always have proclamations, but occasionally there are items which I issue proclamations on that I think deserve some additional attention, and we have 2 tonight. The first is Suicide Prevention Month. Whereas according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death among young people between the ages of 10 and 34, and one of the leading causes of all deaths in Illinois. Whereas almost 5 times as many people died by suicide than in alcohol-related motor vehicle accidents. Whereas according to the CDC, the most recent data shows that nearly 50,000 people died by suicide across the United States in 2022, a rise of 2.6%. Whereas just one suicide often impacts hundreds of additional people, including family, friends, co-workers, neighbors, and community members, with 1 in 5 of those affected reporting that the experience had a devastating and lasting impact. Whereas recent statistics indicate that nationwide, nearly 78% of communities do not have enough mental health providers to meet the level of need. Whereas September is known globally as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, providing a dedicated time to come together around this difficult topic, raise the visibility of mental health resources and suicide prevention services available in our communities, further the public conversation about mental health, raise awareness of the impact of suicide, help destigmatize the conversation, and help connect those in need with the appropriate support services. Whereas organizations such as DuPage County Crisis Services, NAMI DuPage, and others serve on the front line of a war that many refuse to discuss, as stigma regarding suicide and mental health issues remains all too prevalent. Whereas the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline provides free and confidential emotional support to people in suicidal crisis or emotional distress 24 hours a day, 7 days a week across the United States, and has established hashtag #BeTheOne2 in order to help spread the word about actions we all can take to prevent suicide. Now therefore, I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim September 2024 as Suicide Prevention and Action Month in Downers Grove, and encourage all residents to take the time to understand the importance of mental health education, recognize the importance of taking care of ourselves and others, take proactive steps to care for each other, and make suicide help resources, such as the DuPage County Crisis Phone Support, BeThe12.com, 988, the National Suicide Support Lifeline, and others, known to all. Dated this 3rd day of September 2024, Downers Grove, Illinois. On the screen is the number that we all hope everyone is aware of and makes their friends and neighbors aware of as well. Just a little bit of help and a little bit of attention could save a life. Second one tonight is Hunger Action Month. Whereas nutrition-related conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, and high blood pressure significantly decrease Americans' lifespans and quality of life, leading to millions of deaths per year and millions of sick, disabled, and cognitively impaired individuals. Whereas food security and lack of access to healthy foods contributes to the development of various nutritional-related illnesses, and children facing hunger are more likely to experience developmental delay, difficulties in school, and experience social and behavioral problems. Whereas according to Feeding America, just over 1.5 million people in Illinois are facing hunger, and of them, over 425,000 are children. Whereas increased healthy food access and food security in Downers Grove enables residents of all ages, ethnicities, and cultures to lead happier, more productive, and more active lives, helps children to develop to their fullest potential, and supports thriving local communities. Whereas food banks across the country, including local fish food pantry, West Suburban Community Pantry, People's Resource Center, local churches, and others, work not only to meet the needs of those in our community, but also to raise awareness and bring attention to the issue of hunger and food security, and encourage involvement in efforts to end hunger in their communities. Now therefore, I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim September 2024 as National Hunger Action Month in Downers Grove, and encourage all residents to find opportunities to donate to, volunteer for, or otherwise help our local food support systems, such as Downers Grove Area Fish, the West Suburban Community Pantry, People's Resource Center, local churches, and others, to help promote food access and improve food security wherever possible. Dated this third day of September 2024, Downers Grove, Illinois. There are, as noted, many resources, and one of the biggest things you can do is help those resources. They're working every day to try and bridge that gap, and they could all use our help. So thank you for the time. Item 4, minutes of previous council meetings. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the regular meeting minutes and executive session meeting minutes from August 20th, 2024 as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Sorry, Danny, I'm going to ask for a roll call on votes just to make sure you get on the record. Item 5, public comments portion of our meeting. This is the portion of the meeting where we take public comments from the public on items not on tonight's agenda. As we get to agenda-listed items, there will be additional opportunities for public comment. So if you have an item that you'd like to comment on which is not on tonight's agenda, please come up to the podium and let us know what's on your mind.
Beautiful new space.
I don't think we have an answer to that. Pick one. Set a trend.
Anyway, beautiful new space, by the way. Love it. Good evening, Mayor Barnett and Village Commissioners. My name is Dr. Jody Harrop, and I am the chair of the Civic Affairs and Public Policy Committee for Equality Downers Grove. We are so appreciative of the support that we have historically received from the village in our efforts to create an inclusive and equitable community for all Downers Grove residents. And we are excited to take the next step in ensuring that our community remains a safe and welcoming space for all. To that end, EQDG is honored to offer a position statement which clearly states the values that make Downers Grove a welcoming village. It is imperative that we as a community, particularly during this time of division and strife, actively choose to embrace compassion, respect, and unity. We are stronger when we work together to build a community based on inclusion and acceptance in which every resident has the opportunity to thrive and contribute, and when we actively choose to reject the bigotry and hate that threatens to divide us. Thus, we offer this position statement that clearly identifies Downers Grove as a village that values and supports all of its residents, regardless of differences in race, religion, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, age, ability, gender identity, or sexual orientation. We hope that Village Council will share our vision by considering adopting these values as an official position of the village during this critical time in our history. Whereas the Village of Downers Grove is dedicated to creating an inclusive environment that welcomes, respects, and encourages the contributions of all its residents in enriching our community, and in which every individual feels valued, respected, safe, and is given the opportunity to thrive. And whereas the Village of Downers Grove welcomes all people, regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, age, ability, gender identity, or sexual orientation. And whereas the Village of Downers Grove denounces hatred, prejudice, racism, sexism, bigotry, bullying, or violence in any manner toward any individual, regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, age, ability, gender identity, or sexual orientation, and rejects efforts to intimidate, threaten, or marginalize any members of our community. And whereas the Village of Downers Grove believes acts of hate, intolerance, and discrimination undermine the principles of integrity, equality, and freedom that our town stands for, and that it is our collective responsibility to stand against these acts. And whereas the Village of Downers Grove is committed to ensuring that our business community, our schools, our governmental organizations, and our public spaces are all places of acceptance which foster compassion, understanding, and solidarity among all residents by promoting inclusive practices, building respectful dialogue, and standing together against acts of hate. Now therefore be it resolved that we, the Village Council of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim our unwavering support for inclusion, equity, and respect for all individuals within our community. We denounce all forms of hate, bigotry, and discrimination, and commit to actively working toward a more equitable and inclusive village. Thank you for allowing me to present this, and I have copies of this statement for the council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and trustees. Scott Melrose, resident of Downers Grove. I'm here to, first of all, express thanks for the repair of the water main break that happened late Sunday, early Monday at the corner of Fairview and Grant. I actually live almost directly across the street from that. Seems like that water main has been breaking once a year or more over the time I've lived here. So the annual break just happened. This one was more intense than we've seen in the past. And first of all, let me thank the village for getting the repair done, getting work on it done promptly, relentlessly, and tenaciously until it was done. I was very thankful when the water came back on last night about 9 o'clock. I still have concerns though. The water that came through was more intense than it has been in previous breaks. The street literally buckled across the street from me. Fairview buckled, and it still bears the scars of that. Also, there were gushers popping up along my side of the street, and unfortunately, these weren't Jed Clampett's proverbial bubbling crude. Otherwise, we might be having a different conversation. But it did literally bubble up on at the apron that I share with my neighbor to the north, Bob Wagner. He shares his concerns about the pavement there being undermined. Also went all the way totally under the apron, the sidewalk, and all across my driveway from underneath, and popped up on the south side of that. And then also popped up after crossing underneath the sidewalk that the village just replaced in front of my house. So I'm concerned about those pavements being literally undermined. About a year ago, right about this time, I was actually hustling to comply with the building department after having that same driveway replaced in getting the grass to the state they wanted. That was the one thing the inspectors cared about in that driveway, how the grass looked afterwards, even though it forced me to, with my own hands and a shovel, dig out a cliff that had been there prior to me buying the house. So the grass would grow on it. I pray that the village has as much concern over pavement being undermined as it does about that grass. Further, the neighbors to the south of me, Gerard Rios and Julie Rimbo, are concerned about the sidewalk and also the possible continued buckling in Fairview. The neighbor across the street, Janice Woods, shares similar concerns. And one of my other neighbors is also here to speak. Thanks for your time and attention. But also, what's the process for registering that water undermining the pavement in case it happens to collapse or buckle 6 hours, 6 weeks, 6 months, or 3 years from now?
We're taking notes on it right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Robin Tryloff, and I've been a proud resident of Downers Grove for more than 30 years. I'm here tonight to share information about Downers Grove's participation in National United Against Hate Week. This annual event calls for local civic action to combat hate and implicit biases that threaten the safety and civility of our communities. Created in response to the rise in hate expressions, United Against Hate Week empowers residents to reject hate and build safer, more equitable communities. It has now spread to more than 200 localities nationwide. In Downers Grove, 3 organizations, Not in Our Town, Equality Downers Grove, and You Belong, are collaborating to take action during this week. We invite residents to support our local efforts to assist our most vulnerable citizens, people lacking food and shelter, which is in keeping with the mayor's proclamation tonight declaring Hunger Action Month. Thank you, Mayor. You can help by participating in the community kitchen organized by local churches and by donating food to Downers Grove pantries. Through these efforts, we want to demonstrate that when we work together, we can combat hate, restore respect and civil discourse, and embrace the strength of diversity to build an inclusive and equitable community for all. We hope you will join us during this week of action, and we will email you soon with more details. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vibha Rajput. This is regarding about my building. It's on Ogden Avenue, 1734 Ogden Avenue in Downers Grove. And Mr. Bob, Mayor, I call you so many times. What is this? Yes or no? Your
Yes,
smile
yes,
is yes,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And how come you never return my calls? Why?
I think that you've been talking with our Community Development Department, correct?
Even though I am talking with them, but being a mayor, don't you think you should return the calls?
I probably should return the calls.
I know the mayor in Oak Brook, right, Mr. Malani. I know lots of mayor in Schaumburg. I always do the fundraising for them. And I talk to everyone, and they said, no matter what, you are residents or even non, but since he's a mayor, that should be a generous reason you should call me back. Why? Because I'm Indian? Why? Because I'm woman? You did not even bother to call me back.
Ma'am, you're correct, and I apologize. I should have called you back. I got lots of reasons. They're bad excuses. But I also know that you've been in touch with community development, and they're working through the issues. So I'll be happy to follow up and call you back. It's pretty uncommon for me to not get back to people, and I apologize.
And finally, I talked to the Will County judge. I know them, and DuPage County judge. Like I said, our Indian communities helps everyone, and they recommend me to go to council meeting because that is recorded with the state. So they said, go and put your concern there. So I'm here for 1 year. You guys, Nora's giving us hard time. They closed the restaurant for reason the wall, which is not attached with the ground, not attached with the ceiling. We just took the wall out just to make it open. It has no electricity, it has nothing attached. It's just simply dry walls. And since 1 year, I have architects, I have engineer, they all give the drawing to her. And she's keep refusing, and those people give up. They said, we cannot do it, work with her. They said, there's something going on, they don't even like you, or there's something. So I left messages with Nora, weeks and weeks. And after weeks and weeks, she don't even reply, just like you. And then I have to come to the village hall to catch her. It is very sad. I have a properties in many village, DuPage County, Cook County, Grundy County. I never have this bad experience. And I improved the property. That property was very in bad shape. I painted, I fixed the parking lot, I fixed the parking lot parts and whole. She gave me such a hard time. Why? Because I fixed it? She said, you raised the parking lot. I said, I did not raise the parking lot. You can ask the guy. He raised a little bit parking lot because he was putting asphalt, which is normal. It's not even 2 inches. So still, and she was keep sending me the tickets. And the tickets were sending on the holidays, ruining the weekends, Christmas time. And I said, well, very thank you. And they said, if you don't have it done within 2 days before the holidays, we will take you to the court and you have to pay all the tickets. 2 days holidays, nobody works. I'm a widow. If my husband, he was contractor, he was engineer, I could have it done. Now I have to beg to the people to do it and pay even double or triple. You think it's fair? And I have it done. And all this now, finally, after all this struggle, hiring architect, hiring engineer, 2 different architect, 2 different electricians, 2 different architect, nobody's work she liked it. Finally, we hired somebody from the Downers Grove village, which is recommended by her, that Century 21, not 21 Studio. And she said, yeah, they work with us, so they know what they are doing. And they present everything, the guy did it. And my tenant spent over $10,000 just for taking down this wall. And now, the other day, they scheduled for the inspection. And they call my tenant, and we will inspect the property. That was on Thursday, last week. And then all of a sudden, he called back to the inspector to follow up. They are coming. They said, no, we are not coming because Nora stopped us. And immediately I called Nora. Nora said, oh, I sent the message email to Jagnesh, the tenant. Jagnesh said, I never got it. I said, Nora, do you have a proof? You told me same thing many times. Oh, I shoot the email. But you never did. What is the reason why they don't like us? What things we are doing wrong? Please, I wanted to know. And I said, what is the wrong now? She said, oh, he did not put from the door to step, how many square feet is that? It could be 200, and if he put 220, 202, she's making a big deal. Every little thing is big deal. She said, I stop it, not to go there. I stopped the inspection.
Let me stop you a second. I understand, I think.
If she will have no job for 3.
Can I stop you for just a second?
Sure.
What we're not going to do here, because nobody up here, including myself, is prepared, is to try and go through all of the steps of a year plus worth of inspections and permits and submissions and et cetera. There's just no way. Nobody up here is ready for that. That's not possible. So when you ask why to each of these things, those are fair questions to ask, to which you should
Can you
get.
go to the mic so I cannot hear?
Those are fair questions to ask to which you should get answers, but there's not a chance that it can come from this body here tonight. It's just not possible. And I think that ought to be pretty obvious. If you have a year's worth of back and forth with inspectors and architects and engineers and permit submissions, clearly there's a lot more to this story than what any of us are going to be able to digest from the dais here tonight. So what we can do, if you'd like, is we can set up a time when we can meet, and I would be happy to participate in that meeting to try and get a better understanding. But it's not, what you're describing is pretty unique and pretty extraordinary. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of building permits and inspections going on through the course of the year, year after year after year, and they just don't go like this. So I understand you're upset, and I apologize for not calling you. But as for the balance of what you're talking about, there's no way we can react to it here tonight. What we can do is I can agree to set up a meeting to sit in and hear it But we can't possibly do anything with that information tonight.
Well,
Does that
I
make sense?
rather, sure, yeah, set
Okay.
up the meeting, and I hope you will show up in the meeting.
I hope so too.
Okay, great. And, you know, I wanted to know, like, why is big deal? This is not attached with anything.
I
Okay,
can't,
I
I can't
got
speak
you,
to.
I
listen,
got you, I got you. I
I'm
will
an
also
I'm an
follow up.
engineer too. There's an architect at the end of the table. Why
Yeah.
it's a big deal? We'd have to have a lot more information to answer that question.
Okay, all righty, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Mercado. I live at 4523 Fairview. I'm also here to talk about the water main break that happened Sunday into Monday morning. It seems like every time it happens, my property takes the brunt of all of the water. Like, it gets in my house. It's flooding where I can't even walk out my door and like step out to my driveway. I've voiced my concerns before via email. I can't remember her last name. I forgot my phone out of all days. Julie is her name. I've been emailing her back and forth, and seems like it doesn't get resolved. I'm concerned about structural damage to the front of my property. The front of my stairs are now leaning more to the right as a result to all the water that my property undertakes. And I hope you understand that when I say flooded, I mean flooded. Like, it's completely submerged underwater. So I need some resolutions, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Hi, my name is Clorna Greco. I've been in Downers Grove working for 39 years. I'm here to talk about the outdoor dining. As I've said many a times, outdoor dining in the summertime or spring or fall, whatever is good. But as I've stated repeatedly, from June 17th to July 17th, between the hours of 5:30 and 7:30 when I would make my rounds, only 5 of those days were people outside really dining because of our humidity. And if it's supposed to be getting hotter and hotter and hotter, I just don't understand that the taxpayers should have to pay for expanding these sidewalks and having these restaurants dine out there. Before we even consider doing that, and I know I heard the drawings are going to be tomorrow, but before we even consider doing something like that, I think we need to have an alternative parking solution for spots that we are going to be losing. And every time more restaurants come in, as we saw from the survey that was done in 2019, we really don't have any parking left in this parking garage for the capacity that these restaurants do need, and we've had new restaurants since then. Instead of the taxpayers paying it, maybe these restaurants, for every parking spot that we're going to be losing, and $245 million, that was as of 2019, parking garage is going to was only going to accommodate a little over 200 spots. Maybe you have to talk to these restaurants and say, are they comfortable? If you're taking 2 parking spots away, are you comfortable paying $20,000 every year for increasing your property? Basically, that's what they're doing. They're increasing their property. And that would be like a tax to them. We have to Downers Grove is going to have to maintain it. We're going to lose that. We're going to have to build a garage. I don't really know if they're interested in doing that, but I really don't think the taxpayers should have to incur something like that. And on a side note, I think somebody should look at what some of these businesses on Main Street are paying in property tax. Maybe they don't care that our tax is going up. It doesn't seem some of them are paying their fair share. Thank you.
Others?
David Rose. Yesterday was Labor Day, the holiday by which America's capitalists give a token nod to the country's working people. The holiday reflects the capitalist desire that working people see their fate tied to the nation's capitalist economy, not to solidarity with workers around the world. The bulk of the world's workers celebrate their solidarity on May Day. May Day is too linked with communism and socialism for U.S. political and economic leaders. U.S. history is quite clear. They don't tolerate sympathy for communist and socialist ideas, actions, and people, ergo Labor Day. Republicans routinely cascade Democrats as socialists and communists, which Democrats typically counter with the retort, no, we're not, as if being one or the other is by definition unpatriotic. Neither major political party pushes very hard for policies to improve the lives of working people, unless appearing to do so increases one's chances of getting elected. Once in office, of course, the reality of governing and dealing with competing interests kicks in. Resistance by capitalists to improving the lot of workers starts in the workplace, of course, and is linked directly to their active and passive endorsement of racism and sexism. The lack of universal medical coverage is directly tied to both, as is the lack of equitable funding of K-12 education and the ongoing battles over worker rights and voter rights. The nation's leaders accepted slavery from the get-go and have never fully addressed its harmful political, economic, and cultural effects. Not surprisingly, then, they encourage Americans to see race, not class, as the prime socioeconomic distinction in the country. This practice, Labor Day, should really be called End of Summer Day. It's treated simply as a day off work, except for retail, hospitality, and amusement sectors of the economy. This practice, Labor Day, really isn't much of a celebration of working people. It's not devoted to discussing labor issues and policies or commemorating labor history, nor is it a time to examine the aptness of capitalism as the nation's economic system going forward. Unless the point be missed, we do celebrate capitalists and capitalism with two holidays, actually. One we call Christmas, the other we call Super Bowl Sunday. Political compromise in recent decades yielded policies from which workers got some benefits, but capitalists typically got more. The potential for compromise was made possible by two mechanisms underpinning the grease of compromise: economic growth, reliance on energy slaves to amplify the capacity to do work, the second, the U.S. being the world's hegemon. The former is the core component for increasing the output of goods and services people use. The latter refers to the U.S. marauding around the world just in search of labor and resources to exploit and appropriate in an effort to maintain domestic tranquility. Two mechanisms are linked, though beginning in the 80s in a way that led to our present polarization. Specifically, the U.S. shipped jobs overseas. Deindustrialize is the euphemism for the decision by capitalists to reduce costs by moving production to countries with weaker labor and environmental regulations. It illustrates their prioritization of profit over both labor and the environment, other than the environment and employees of the places where they live and play. The marauding in recent years has become an embarrassment and a dangerous political problem. The nation's increasingly foolhardy testing of Russia and China's patience vis-a-vis Ukraine and Taiwan, respectively, and its support for Israel's genocide of Palestinians are the salient instances. The effort to thwart Russia's and China's growing influence in the world and to use Israel to keep the Middle East politically weak and divided, and thereby to control the world's oil market, is widely supported by both parties. Like Obama before her, Democratic candidate Harris is deemed unelectable unless she proclaims support for continued U.S. marauding. It's called spreading democracy. We, or better still our proxies, fight them over there so we don't have to fight them over here, is the delusional refrain. Delusional because the exchange of nuclear weapons or conduct risks is not something you contain or win. As VC well knows, I contend the risky behavior arises because our way of living in rich nations, most prominently the U.S., including here in Downers Grove, is not ecologically sustainable. But we refuse to face this reality and hard questions it begs. Is capitalism compatible with ecological sustainability? Is democracy the relentless pursuit of growth? If not, what do we do? Why must we face these questions? Well, for one obvious point, if capitalism is compatible, how did we get into this mess? Why didn't America's capitalists keep jobs at home and welcome environmental regs as incentive to search for ways for the U.S. to lead the world toward an ecological way of living? If democracy is compatible, why have past decades yielded so little in the way of effective policies and actions? For example, Democrats usually encourage Americans to believe we need merely shift from relying on fossil fuels to so-called renewable energy, and the American way of life can go on as usual, including the pursuit of growth. On the other hand, a significant chunk of the population, Trump Party supporters, believes climate gas is a hoax and fossil fuels remain essential for both continued prosperity and the U.S. remaining global hegemon. How do such conflicting understandings get resolved, including here in Downers Grove, and resolved in timely fashion, that is, before disasters start reinforcing each other irreversibly, including here in Downers Grove? What do we do when the evidence indicates neither position is credible, and when our political economic system is structured to keep such evidence marginalized, including here in Downers Grove? Now that the end of Summer Day weekend is behind us, are residents and council ready to tackle these challenges? Which of the following aptly answers that question? Hope springs eternal, hope against hope, hope for the best, not a hope in hell. Thank you.
Anyone else? Comments not on or very far from tonight's agenda? Okay, just a little clarification. There was a comment made about property taxes and whether or not businesses downtown pay their fair share. To be clear, a couple things. Village of Downers Grove doesn't set your tax rates or your valuations, excuse me. The county assessor's office does that. They value each property. It's part of their obligation. We tell the county how many taxes dollars to collect. The assessor determines how that ought to be divided up from property to property. There is, I believe, an appeal process if you don't like your taxes, or perhaps maybe even somebody else's. I'm not super familiar with it, but the county assessor's office is, fortunately, the township, and it's here in Downers Grove. So right over by North High School is the township assessor's office. If you have a question about your property taxes, whether you think they're fair or not, that would be a good person to check in with. Moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion concerning the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Davenport?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye, that passes unanimously. Item 7 is our first reading. This is the portion of the meeting where we discuss an item on which we do not plan to take final action this evening. This is an item which may have been discussed previously, may be first discussed tonight, but again, these are items on which we do not plan to take formal action tonight. Dave, you have a first reading item for us?
I do. Just one item on tonight's first reading agenda, Mayor. It's a motion authorizing staff to negotiate a redevelopment agreement for Civic Center Lot 2 with amended key terms. Civic Center Lot 2 is the property just to our east. As part of our Civic Center plan, it will be sold to a private sector developer for redevelopment, and the money generated in terms of the purchase price and the real estate taxes paid will help pay the debt service on the building we are in right now. On February 6th of 2024, the Village Council approved a motion authorizing staff to negotiate a redevelopment agreement with LCIDP, and there were key terms attached to it. Since that time, staff and LCIDP have been actively negotiating that redevelopment agreement. But due to changes in the anticipated cost of construction and the likely value of the completed apartment development, LCIDP has requested amendments to certain key terms. They are to reduce the purchase price by $1.2 million, to waive village building permit fees associated with out-of-pocket, not associated with out-of-pocket expenses incurred by the village, and for the village to pay for the cost of village-owned off-site public improvements near a shared driveway near the vehicle fleet building. As part of the requested amendments, staff also negotiated an increase in the earnest money, and the revised key terms also include minor changes that reflect the fact that the IEPA has actually already approved the remedial action plan for the property, and there is a revised grading plan. It's important to note that what we've learned along the way, speaking of property taxes and assessments, that our financial position overall with this development is anticipated to be better than it was just a couple months ago in February. That's due to the updated projections to the tax increment that will be generated by this. So we're actually in a little bit better financial shape even with these changes. LCIDP leadership is here. If the council has any questions for them, and we are happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Thank you, Dave. Any comments from the audience on this item? Please come up to the podium.
Janet Winningham, resident. The council should reject the proposed amendment to reduce the sale price of Lot 2 by $1,215,000 plus other economic concessions. As shown on the draft amendment attached to the proposal, key terms have been discussed since January 2024 and reaffirmed in February 2024 and several months ago. The rationale for the proposed concession is twofold. First, anticipated revenues from the TIF are higher than projected a year ago. This is irrelevant. The projections are just that, a guess, however educated. This is not cash in hand and is not valid for the basis of this discussion. Secondly, the developer says that due to changes, which must mean increases in the cost of construction and the likely value of the completed apartments, which must mean decreases, the price reduction is requested along with waiver of permit fees and the taxpayer shouldering the burden of costs of infrastructure improvements that will benefit the property. Seriously, where have they been the last 7 months? The developer is the development arm of a general contractor who has constructed this building and is working on the entire project. They have been on site every working day for months. There should be no surprises. This for-profit developer contractor is highly sophisticated and is expert in cost estimating. They do highly complex projects that take years to complete, longer than this job. They are one of the top contractors in the business. They didn't know how to price this job? Really? I don't believe it. And if they didn't price it correctly, well, that's unfortunate, but it shouldn't fall on the taxpayers to fund their mistakes. This request shortchanges the taxpayers for the benefit of a for-profit entity. The taxpayers were promised that the sale of proceeds would pay down the bond debt for this Civic Center project by $2,760,000, not $1,545,000. Keep in mind also that the $60 million cost figure for the project as described in the village materials is really closer to $120 million. According to the long-range plan report a year ago, the cost to retire the bonds issued to fund the construction will be at least $58 million on top of the cost of construction. There will be no concessions to the taxpayers who are on the hook to pay down this debt. A couple of meetings ago, Mayor, you said that in 10 years, the residents of the Downers Grove will be proud of this building, and I hope you're right, because the taxes levied to pay for the building will continue for another 15 years. Time will tell. In any case, this proposal shortchanges the taxpayers who should not be asked to make up the difference for the developer. If this developer does not want to go forward, then get a new one. Thank you.
Hi, Clorinda Greco. This is a 45% discount. If we asked for a 45% discount when they were building a $60 million building, do you think we would have got it? I don't think so. You need to pivot. Maybe these aren't the right developers. Maybe this land, which is pretty big, should be the place to put our new restaurants with underground parking and 3 or 4 restaurants and apartments on the second floor and rooftop dining, looking out towards the downtown area, Christmas time. They could build this perfect area, but to make the taxpayers eat up what they're saying they can't, everyone knows things go up year after year after year. And now all of a sudden, now they can't afford it? Well, maybe they shouldn't be doing that. I don't really think that we got a 45% discount when we were doing it. The taxpayers should not have to pay for them. It is a for-profit. For-profit. It's not a non-for-profit. There is a non-for-profit in there. Let's go with in a different direction. If they don't want to do it, I'm sure we can find some other developers to do it and maybe do something that we need a little bit better than what they're planning on doing. I mean, they're just making their pockets full at the expense of the taxpayers.
Anyone else on this item? Okay, council comments, questions? Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that made me very comfortable with LCI in the first instance was the fact that they're affiliated with Leopardo Construction. And I know from personal experience that Leopardo Construction is a good union general contractor. Not everybody in the room can see it, but I'm wearing a shirt tonight from one of my clients, the Iron Workers Local 63. Well, the fact that they're looking to make all of these different changes, I think masks something else. What they're looking to really do is to lower the cost of construction by also taking it non-union, and that's a deal breaker for me. In addition to that, I think the fact that they're coming back looking for these concessions is a breach of trust. As was pointed out, we've been dealing with key terms for basically the entire year. And coming back now and looking for a 45% discount and other concessions is just too far for me. I think we ought to go back out to bid. I think the market is changing. It has changed over months. But interest rates are about to drop, and maybe it shouldn't be an apartment building. Maybe it's mixed use. Maybe it's something else. I don't know. But if we're going to go out to bid, go back out to bid, I think the time is now. And I don't think we should do it with LCI partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Leslie?
Yeah, I've been struggling with this one back and forth, with a partner that you slightly know, you at least kind of know you're going to get something similar to what you asked for, but if we go back out to bid, things can change in 5 or 6 months, and who knows where it'll be. But I have a lot of similar concerns as Commissioner Jose. I have the same concerns in terms of of not using quality union contractors. And I do also have concerns that, yes, as we know, things have been shifting for quite some time, that hasn't quite shifted enough that we should be cutting the purchase price by 50% and asking for permit waivers. So I am still trying to collect information, but I also have a lot of concerns with moving forward with this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I know you mentioned that the developer is here. Not sure if this is appropriate, but it was offered to us to ask questions. I guess the big question for me is, what are you basing the offer cut on? Help us understand with such a dramatic cut why that's something that we as a village should consider.
Sure. Council, staff, thanks for having us here this evening. I'm Chad Broderick, Managing Partner of LCI Development Partners. This is Justin Parr. You may remember him from the February meetings. He's also a partner at LCI Development Partners. Justin's been the partner in charge, and I'll let him kind of address those items.
So there have been a few things that have changed since the original RFP was issued. One of the things that you can reference in the key terms is that was an open item, since we agreed to those key terms, was the site delivery condition and working together on meeting IEPA requirements. The information that was presented in the original RFP led us to believe that we were not going to have to haul off certain soils from the property. That turned out to be inaccurate when the IEPA followed up with the village this year, so prior to the RFP and prior to the key terms being agreed to. We've been working for the last few months with city staff to identify the cost of those potential soils removals. So that is one of the things that factors into this. Broader market costs, labor, materials, of course Can
I interrupt you real quick?
Absolutely.
I apologize. I want some clarity on that. You're saying that the cost of the soil removals was open-ended in the original RFP, and that they exceeded what your expectations were?
The potential contaminants were, from the information that we reviewed and that the other respondents reviewed, that changed. There was an IEPA, they said that the testing that was done was not enough, and there had to be more testing done. And I don't know the exact specifics, but I do know that our understanding of what we were going to have to do last October was different as of May of this year.
So because of that, you are thinking you will incur
Potentially incur additional costs.
Potentially, but there's no clarity around that simply because you don't know until you start clearing.
Correct.
Okay. And you did the work here for this site?
We did not.
You did not do the work for this site? Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
So that's one item. Broader market costs, somebody brought up, labor, materials, those costs go up every year. Yes, we built that into our pro forma projections. Property taxes, and you can look at this in the materials, but what we submitted is that we estimated property taxes for the project would come in at about $3,400 per door on an annual basis. New assessments are coming out, and we believe that that number will actually land somewhere between $4,400 and $4,700. So that is quote-unquote good for the village who's collecting those property taxes. That has an opposite effect for how it works when you're trying to develop a profitable project, because that becomes a cost. So taking those things into account, we reran our numbers and we said this is what we need in order for this to go forward. And again, this has been a discussion with village staff to try and identify, what is the least amount that we can ask for in terms of a concession on purchase price to keep this thing going forward. As it relates to this being a union versus non-union project, we estimate that 65% of the total trade costs on this deal will be union. 100%, not likely, but roughly 65%.
Thanks for that, but you'll find me on a picket line.
If we were to try and do this as a union project, we would have a lot bigger gap than we currently have, and it just would not go forward. That is our preference. Our preference would be to do it 100% union and have Leopardo as our general contractor. Unfortunately, at this time in the market, we cannot do that. That was not our intention. Our intention was to have Leopardo build this project. Leopardo family is still investing in this project. They still want to see this project go forward, and they understand the pressure in the market that we are in today, that it's just not possible for Leopardo Construction as a 100% union contractor to be the general contractor on this project.
Anything else?
No, other than I think, like my colleagues, I have some concerns, some things to think about.
Mike?
Can you clarify, you said you didn't have anything to do with this project on this site?
So LCI Development Partners is a completely separate organization, though we do have a preferred relationship with Leopardo as a builder.
And you share information then?
We share certain resources, correct.
So, all right. This is a tough one to swallow. It's maybe the classic example of the bird in hand's worth two in the bush sort of scenario, right? Easy to say we should just kick this to the curb, and honestly, that was my knee-jerk reaction to this. But then, what's next, right? So, what are we opening ourselves up to in terms of back out to bid? What do we get back in terms of those bids, those development offers? We could end up in a situation that's not nearly as good as this, and there's a matter of time too, right? In terms of our budgeting and how we've kind of structured things going forward, it's built on the idea that we'll be receiving some incomes. So if the property sits there not sold for a longer amount of time, that there is a cash flow or budgetary impact.
Carrying cost.
Yeah, so a carrying cost to that, right? So I had some specific questions about the development. For those that are kind of digging into the details a little bit, so the earnest money is going from 5% to 18%, but that essentially, if my math is right, works up to a doubling of the earnest money. So basically, $138,000 to $280,000 in earnest money. The key term, under the key terms, developer obligations, where we talk about the developer shall comply with all building and development codes, ordinances and regulations, and shall pay all required fees. What do we mean by all required fees when we were taking the permit costs out? So
if there are other impact fees or other fees of that sort.
okay.
Anything other than the building permit fees.
All right, so when we get down under village obligations and we look at waiving village building permit fees excluding any village reimbursements relative to reasonable out-of-pocket expenses, why do we have the word reasonable in there? Sorry to hit you on that.
It's just a typical term, just so that we're not incurring outrageous, outlandish fees for extraordinary consultants that are unneeded.
So this has traditionally been interpreted that anytime the village goes outside of our staff team to a consultant, and the consultant sends us a bill for those review services, those are not waived.
Okay. That's good. Also, under village obligations, when we talked about consider granting cross-access easements if requested, and pursuing removing of existing easements on the lot. So I assume that there are some existing easements, and what are we talking about?
Correct, there are some old easements. They have, to my knowledge, they've all been taken care of in the last month or so, so there are no longer any existing easements on the old property.
So what kind of cross-access easements might be requested? Do we know?
This is related to the potentially shared driveway that would benefit the village and access to our fleet garage, would also serve as a main access point to the developers upon the building.
All right, and I guess that's it for me right now. I'm wondering if I did see that we adjusted the end date, right? Everything will be finished by January 31st of 27. Is that right?
Correct.
So, what happens if we don't finish things in time? We kind of living with a little bit of that right now.
Yeah, usually in the redevelopment agreements, there's some performance requirements and there's some something at stake, so we're still working that through with the developer, but you'll see that in the final redevelopment agreement. But basically, if the developer doesn't comply with the schedule, there are some ramifications.
And then you all are saying that this is what you've got to have to do the project or you're walking away. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
Correct.
All right, that's all I have for now, Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So you guys obviously know you're looking at 6 really disappointed people, right? And we can't make you do anything, but it sucks for the village. As was alluded to earlier, this is your job, right? Including things like contingencies and forecasts and projections. That's not new, and so it feels lousy. Feels lousy. I don't have any questions for you guys. You guys have made your case clear. I think it's cruddy. Other words that would be more appropriate for the construction site, which we hope to have down the road, but it's lousy. The question I have for staff that I'd like, not an answer tonight, but part of, our choice at this point is take a lousy deal, somebody kind of welched on, or go back out to bid. That's our choice. And so, honestly, for me, I feel like a lot of my responsibility, I don't know whether a new bid process would result in a different type of development or not. I can't begin to guess that, but what I maintain a high sense of sensitivity to is the financial obligations we have to the community. And so I'd like to understand those better. So here's my question. One of the things that happens that you guys have really kind of stuck us with now, right, is we go back out to bid, all this nonsense is floating out there. So if I'm your competition or the next guy that wants to bid, I clearly know what the village's baseline is, right? So thanks for that, guys. That sucks. That was bad. But what I'd like to get a sense of, and I think we probably could model up over the next week or so, is we have a time component to this. So if we go back out and bid again, we can have some sense of the impact of time on that versus taking this lousy deal now. And then we can roll back and figure out what the value of that is. And I'd like to understand that piece of it better.
Yeah, we get that. Mr. Baker has been modeling this project for years, both on the construction side and everything we've incurred here and the revenue side in this. We'll show you the math next week. It's the potential loss of up to 2 construction seasons of tax increment.
Yeah.
So we'll get that information.
And then the cost of sort of covering that ourselves.
Yes.
Is what I'm sitting here stewing about, right?
correct.
Because it's likely if we go back to bid, any other new number is probably gonna be similar, because why not? We've just showed our cards to everybody.
Well-
So I'd like to understand that. Maybe not.
I don't think we've shown our cards. I think we've shown what our response might be to a lower bid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And I also think, for my part, I'd be more comfortable giving the money to somebody else.
I want to understand the math better. I'd like to actually understand that before I make a decision about that.
I do too.
So that's the only thing I have.
Mayor?
Yeah, please,
Can we
Chris.
see if Danny has anything
Yeah,
he wants
I
to
was gonna say
add?
that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For that.
Yep.
Danny, you listening to this?
Yeah, I'm here, sorry, I just had you on mute.
Yeah, not
Hear
the,
my toddlers.
not the, I might rather have talked to them right now. Can you got any questions or comments you want to add to the discussion?
You know, I definitely understand where the sentiment is from my fellow colleagues. The one thing I am concerned about, as was mentioned, is, you know, if we say, you know, we're not gonna go forward with these guys, where does that leave us, and what kind of market is it? You know, is another developer gonna be on the same page as these guys? Is this project seen in a different light to these developers? So I'm still trying to weigh that out, but I'm definitely interested in learning a little bit more before we make this decision. But yeah, I'm just kind of concerned with what else might be out there.
All right.
That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else? I think we're
We'll bring
good.
this
I think
back
we're good.
next week with the information requested by the council, and that ends our first reading tonight, Mayor.
Dave, before you, just one more comment on this. We're going to have to face a question next Friday about whether this is an active agenda item or not. And so that probably is going to be a big function of when and we get that kind of information, whether everybody feels like they've been able to digest it.
Yeah, we'll get it out as soon as possible. We already have it modeled up.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, that's the end of our first reading. Item 8 is our active agenda. This is the portion of the meeting where we take up subjects that we have talked about at least once before and where we plan to take action this evening. Is there a motion concerning the updated long-range plan?
Mayor, I move that the council accept the 2023 to 2025 long-range plan update as presented.
Second.
Are there any audience comments on this item?
Once again, this is a plan, part of the plan that takes advantages of the taxpayers. Funds from 2022 to 23 exceeded expectations, in no small part because of the $5 million infusion from the Biden-Harris Recovery Act funds. Several $1 million were transferred from the general fund to pay for projects under this plan, such as the streetscape and landscape expenditures, projects that do not have to be done, but council is spending millions to do them. Then, next year, in 2025, after millions of dollars have been spent for unnecessary projects, essential water system infrastructure projects will be undertaken. To pay for the water system infrastructure, cost of water bills will go up 9% per year over the next 2 years and continue thereafter at no less than 5% per year. In 2026, there will be a bond issue taking on debt to pay for essential improvements. Know that the water improvements benefit everybody in the village, or at least all water users anyway. Instead of taking on these projects that are not necessary with funds that could be transferred anywhere, the taxpayers could have had some relief from increased levies on their water bills and property taxes. The council should reorder its priorities from spending millions of taxpayer dollars that benefit only a few people, in many cases for-profit businesses, and reorder their priorities to projects that benefit the entire village. Thank you.
Others on this item? Okay, council comments, questions? Anyone? No?
Yeah,
Chris?
you know, I
Go
just,
ahead.
a couple of things I want to just note here in terms of some of the ongoing expenditures. Two things. One's the health cash balance, which from last year to this year is dropping significantly, and by that I mean our costs are going up. And I noticed that is the same with the risk balance as well, which I believe is workers' compensation and those types of things. Yeah. Something I think we need to just make sure we're keeping an eye on as we think about some of these smoothing things and other opportunities. So just wanted to make sure, call that attention to my fellow commissioners that those are areas that we need to definitely, I know the staff is, but as a council, we need to be paying attention to. I believe we need to be paying attention to as well. That's it. Thank you.
If I could, Mayor, if it's appropriate, just a couple things. We are self-insured for health benefits and risk-related items. And for the last couple of years, we've experienced pretty good low claims experiences. But that hasn't stopped us from identifying the fact that we could have years like this. And so part of the council directive, because Commissioner Gilmartin talked about council oversight on this, council has been in agreement and directed us to take some of the money that's been generated in the great performance of the general fund and put them here to smooth that out. And so that's been a strategic initiative for the last 3 or 4 years, and it's paying off now. We'll preview the FY25 budget. We will be having to make some small adjustments to address this going forward, just as Commissioner Gilmartin pointed out. So you'll see that in the budget message coming forward. And while I have the floor, just a couple things. There was some good news items that were unexpected. While most of the changes in this report were directed by the village council at the previous 3 meetings, and you'll see those in the update box, we did find out unexpectedly that we have been notified we will be receiving a low-interest loan from the IEPA for improvements to the water fund to the tune of $4 million. That's a good thing that it saves us some money on interest expenses and allows us to do more water main projects, and we will be re-looking at the list of water mains to see if that one on Fairview will be added to the list as part of this. So some really good news there. If you're interested, it's detailed out in the little breakout section and highlighted in the report. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Anyone else? Just a broad comment on, unnecessary projects and taxpayer relief. This is a continuation, it's an update to a plan that's 2 years old, which is effectively an evolution of a plan that's been going on for a decade or so. And, unnecessary projects, we're sitting in one. Spent $60 million here, we could have spent probably 30 and cleaned up the old building. There are an awful lot of things that any one person might call unnecessary in any moment. But this council and the last 5, before any of us were sitting up here, have been trying real hard to be frugal and thoughtful. And frankly, the taxes we are all paying, reflect that. That's just the truth. People say I don't like increased taxes. Well, neither do I. Heck, I'd rather pay 0. But I'm paying less here than I am in like 30 other communities in DuPage County with all the same accesses and benefits as sitting in DuPage County. That's also true. It's a value. And what we've done is tried to create a value. That is not the same as lowest cost, narrowest scope. Value and lowest cost, narrowest scope are not the same. And I, for one, am not going to focus on only lowest cost. I'm going to focus on value. I've said that every year I've sat up here, every budget process I've been through, when we talked about street conditions and union contracts and every other subject we've talked up here, for me, I've always said value. And I think the evidence is we're providing a lot of value. Does that mean there are times we do things that's any 1 or 100 or maybe even 1,000 people think are not worth doing or unnecessary? You bet. It sure does. And we're going to continue to do those things. Well, I hope that this council and the next 5 or 6 or 7 councils will continue to focus on value. We had this survey that we've been taking for 6 months, and some number, I don't remember the number, but it was big, 93% or something of the folks that live in Downers Grove are thrilled to live in Downers Grove. Yeah, right, because there's a lot of really good stuff going on, even though some of it might not feel necessary to me right this second. I'm disappointed every time those kind of conversations come up because I really think they miss the idea that it's an entire community and 2 decades worth of people trying to provide value, because that's really what's going on. And so, you know, if you want to take dining as an example, we instituted a food and beverage tax, which is largely, most of which is paid by people who are, in their own discretion, buying prepared foods outside of their home. So it becomes a really discretionary tax. You kind of don't have to pay it unless you want to. But you know what? It's like 25% of the property taxes we pay in terms of its magnitude. So not true, but you'll get the point. We could raise property taxes 25%, eliminate the food and beverage tax, and not do anything to encourage or build up our restaurant community. We could do that. I don't think it's a value. So it's a little bit of a rant, I apologize, but I think there's an awful lot of good going on, not only now, but in years past, and what this is an evolution of that continued good and a focus on long-term value for our community. I think we're doing a good job. Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Davenport?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That passes unanimously. That ends our active agenda tonight. Mayor's report. I've said enough for the evening, at least for now. Council member report outs. This is an opportunity for council members to report out on goings on in the community, other organizations or events they're part of or think the community should know about. Start with Commissioner Davenport.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Leslie.
I look forward to seeing everybody who is registered for the annual Grove Foundation golf outing this Saturday. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks. Chris.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Greg.
Well, this is the first meeting I've sat up here in this chair. We were back there where we'll be in a little bit. I just wanted to say thank you to staff for all the work that's been put in. Thank you to the folks at Leopardo for doing a great job building this building, because I really like this view. It's a lot better than the last one. Thank you, Mayor.
Danny from the Cloud. Got anything?
Actually, I do, Mayor. I'm also looking forward to the Grove Foundation golf outing on Saturday. But there's another event happening in downtown Downers Grove. The Downtown Downers Grove Management Corporation is hosting its 47th Downers Grove Fine Arts Festival this Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., featuring more than 50 juried artists lining Main Street. There'll be live entertainment, kids' art activities, and more. If this all sounds good to you, you can learn more by visiting downtowndg.org. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Danny. If that all sounds good to you, you can also thank the property owners who pay an additional tax beyond the rest of us to help fund those kinds of activities. Manager's report. Dave.
Mayor, nothing right now. We'll move to the other side of the room and set up an informal dinner table conversation for more on guiding DG. Tonight we'll be talking about the Environmental Sustainability Plan outline.
All right, our first transition to everybody flipping around. So give us like 5 minutes or so. We're going to reconvene this meeting, and all of us at the back of the room. And we'll continue our conversation. This is, from your agenda standpoint, this is the portion listed under the manager's report. We're going to do some additional guiding DG work tonight. So with that, Stan.
Thanks, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, council members, and general public. As you know, Guiding DG is a four-pronged project. Tonight we're going to be talking about our Guiding DG, our sustainability plan. Jason Michnik here with the village is going to lead us through a draft report outline, and we're hoping for some really great feedback. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Jason. Thanks so much.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure to present to you a recommended outline for the environmental sustainability plan. Just want to see my gratitude to the Environmental Concerns Commission and Jay for all the hard work that they put into this. We've met a couple of times this last month to make sure that we get this sort of prize that council for the review. We're kind of right here in the middle of a lot of DG stuff. So you guys had a conversation about it last month. Here we're talking about the outline we're looking for. We also have some meetings on streetscape, including a workshop morning at the library, and then going to the comprehensive plan documents later this month. Looking at this evening, so I'm going to go back quickly to May, review some feedback the council gave us in that workshop, as well as review the issues and opportunities for the existing initiative memorandum, before jumping into the actual structure and outline. and then I'll be opening up to you guys for discussion and feedback. So going back to that workshop in May, a couple of things and questions. As a reminder, we asked council to really talk about what sustainability meant. That's a really important thing. It's a really defined term, unfortunately. And the feedback we got was that council generally favored refinements of the existing definition of environmental sustainability from the long-range plan. Some key terms and concepts, going back and looking at all the comments made, were that sustainability is a continuous effort. There's an urgency to act now. It should be both intentional and opportunistic, and we should be leading by example. We should be looking at the authority that council in the village has in policy making, and then also looking at the importance of intergenerational equity when it comes to sustainability. So taking all those concepts, this is a revised definition that ECC has put together for your consideration. So being environmentally sustainable is the continuous and conscious effort to act strategically in service delivery and policy making in a way that preserves resources and enhances the natural environment for future generations. So that would be something for your consideration. It's kind of the basis of how you define sustainability. We also asked, what does success look like? What are the outcomes for this plan? Council said that it should be both forward-looking and aspirational, as well as actionable and measurable. It should be a tool to guide policy and decision-making. And it should have the ability to take the content, the goals, and the objectives out of this plan and slot into existing and other plans and processes. Example, the vision can directly go into the comprehensive plan, and then the action plans from the sustainability plan can align with the long-range planning process. Success would look like measurable progress towards goals and targets, especially in the areas that we identified as gaps in the ECM. There would be a public awareness and participation in the plan, and there would be some element of external acknowledgement for all of the actions and leadership the village is showing in terms of sustainability. In terms of the scope of the sustainability plan, Council said do not limit the plan to village operations only, but get our house in order with the term that was used. Before telling residents and businesses what they must do, and lead by example. Also to recognize the impact that the village has in the community through operations and policy-making authority. There's general support for staff recommendation, which was an emphasis on village operations, collaboration with strategic partners, and easing pathways to sustainable practices in the community. Last one is that the GRC framework did not be taken literally as we crafted the sustainability. Looking at the ECM, which you guys looked at not too long ago, the main findings there were the importance of natural resources to the community, so things like clean air, water, and open space. Those were a key theme and priority. Habitat restoration and improved land management was going to require activities on private property because of the nature of being a built-out community. Sustainability is a perceived weakness in the community, actually the highest weakness in that survey. Climate change poses enhanced risk and likely to also have higher costs associated with it. And that buildings are the largest source of emissions for both the community and the village from the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Also the impact that policy and procurement can have for positive change. And lastly, opportunities to achieve multiple goals in one action. An example there being to reduce emissions and light pollution through the streetlights. So jumping into the outline, this is the overall structure. So this is the sections, the main sections in the proposed outline. And the idea here is really a hierarchy of elements. So the vision, which is that one section, is going to be a timeline looking forward 20 plus years. So that is the aspirational concept of the plan. The objectives are on a 10-year time frame, and then the action plan are going to be on a 2-year time frame. So the idea here that the sustainability plan kind of be a 10-year document, kind of 5 subsequent action plans. Then the overall structure, so we'll have kind of the standard cover pages, executive summary. We'll have an introduction, then get into the vision, The guiding principles and framework is a section that's a little bit different that I'll talk a little bit about. And then we'll go into village objectives and the community objectives, and then a couple of emphases. I'm not going to go through all these sections. I'm really going to highlight the ones that have the most content and substance before I get to you guys for a conversation. So the three big questions that the ECC really wants the introduction to cover is why is the plan being created, what is it going to accomplish, and how will it be achieved? So purpose, a vision, and then a call to action for the community. It also talks about the importance of celebrating the community's heritage and conservation efforts. So things like how Downers Grove got its name, also the history of conservation efforts, community organizations through the acquisition and protection of Lyman Woods and Belmont Prairie. Also a nod to our former public works director, Nan, and the legacy of innovative projects and programs that she really kicked off here in the village. Things that we celebrate as sustainable efforts now, really kind of something that she championed. And then more recently, the Green East Region Contact in the process of creating sustainability plan for the UNEDG. In the vision and goals section, the intention of this, as I mentioned, is really looking forward 20 plus years. So what does a more sustainable community look like if everything went well, we were successful in implementing this continuously? The idea is that the goal statements or vision statements in this section are going to be organized thematically, trying to capture kind of the complexity, interconnectedness of sustainability. So not only is it a challenging word to define, but when you start to pick apart what it means to be sustainable, actions are all interrelated as well as impacts. So these are some example thematic goal areas that we have provided. This may be tweaked, again, as these vision statements and goal statements are crafted. It may make sense at some points to think about capturing them in the highest level or an overarching theme that we possibly can. But these are some examples that we crafted. This section, which we called an outline commitment to change, is really the idea of having this tool for crafting policy or using as a decision-making tool. And the idea is, how are we going to go from the existing conditions that we've identified our baseline to achieving the vision? So this could be either a set of a hierarchy of guiding principles or some sort of action framework, decision-making framework. And this is something that would be used both in the creation of the sustainability plan, but then as opportunities arise that may not be in one of the action plans where a decision needs to be made, this is something that the council and staff will be able to look towards to guide that decision. The village objectives section is really focused on the village as an organization. So this is, again, objectives would be drafted on a 10-year timeline, things that are going towards achieving the vision that's outlined in the previous sections. And the focus areas are really aligning with kind of the functional aspects that we saw in the ECM, the evaluation of the Green East Region Compact Framework. These are things that look both inward to the day-to-day operations of the village, but also the impact that the village has through public service delivery policy as well. And then these are the thematic focus areas, again, kind of aligned with ECM, things that we do in-house on a day-to-day basis, and then things that impact the community or influence sustainability in the community, like policies, the design of infrastructure, all that kind of thing. This section on community sustainability is something that in your outline that's provided to you guys is something that the ECC is recommending as an optional section for your consideration. It's the idea that this should be a community vision, a community sustainability plan, but there's a whole lot in terms of achieving that vision that's going to require the actions, changes in behavior of individuals, households, businesses, and various organizations. So we can think about this almost as like a mini GRC framework before our residents and businesses in the community. This is something that would be kind of crafted around the idea of a branded pledge. So something that is voluntary that people can rally around, and something that kind of sparks more of a grassroots movement, something that people can buy into, becomes kind of something that everybody synonymous with sustainability, building that culture from the ground up not really a top-down approach. The idea here is that this could be kind of an insert or supplement to the core of the sustainability plan that would again really focus on village operations and policy. This is the idea of lead by example of the core. This is something that goes a little bit further. This is something that the village is doing, but the community can participate in as well. There's also discussion of potentially having this be developed on kind of an alternative timeline, or if we are struggling to create the content for the rest of the plan, this can be a little bit longer to make sure that we really finish the core of the sustainability plan time to meet the deadline for the rest of the plan as well. So kicking down to really the most important appendix, this would be the first of those 5 action plans. And these are some examples of kind of what would be identified in those action plans. So similar to the long-range planning process, we have priority action items. We also have the goals and objectives that they align with. Those actors within the village and potentially outside the village that would be involved in those, some cost estimates and funding sources, and then also how are we going to measure success for the actions, both within that 2-year time frame and beyond. Then this is just kind of an example of how we align those vision statements, objectives, and actions. So at the highest level, you have a timeline, right? The village of Downers Grove will be in a zero organization by 2045. Achieving that, one component of that would be that all the streetlights in the village would be run using renewable electricity by 2035. And the actions within that 2-year time frame would be things like replacing a certain percentage of older high-pressure sodium bulbs and fixtures, as well as purchasing renewable energy for the village-owned streetlights within that time frame. So with that, I'm going to hand it to you for your executive discussion.
Thanks, Jason. So, purpose for tonight is really talk about the structure, outline the structure as opposed to, policy or content, right? So scope of the structure. Anybody got any thoughts? Want to start a conversation? Leslie?
Yes, I really thought. I really appreciate this kind of this outline and hearing it first. It's clear that a lot of thought and work went into this. And I'm really impressed with kind of what came out already. I just have some small and some kind of like bigger comments. I'll just go through as I went. So I'm looking for the draft outline. So page 3, when we're talking kind of about the introduction of the hook and the line, is there any way we can kind of have some sort of a nod or a preview to objectives, just to kind of, I didn't really see that in here. Obviously, we saw like the call to action, but it would be nice to just kind of start to see some of those larger objectives that we're trying to accomplish here, and I want to make sure those are in there. I assume they probably will be, but just wanted to clarify. I'm on the section 3 introduction 1. Sorry, I'm looking at the actual draft outline and not the line.
You said on page 3?
Yeah, yes.
A nod to
the objectives, just to kind of get like, obviously it's not going to be specific, but kind of, let's make sure that we're using the consistent language that we're using with some of the objectives there, just to kind of get a good preview of that. Section 4, the aspirational vision and goals. I love that we are trying to almost make this like a personal storytelling that really is and how you address things, especially with the general public. Just what we said, within this bill, we also include a strong impact statement that suggests that we want to be taking strong leadership on this issue and how our village is kind of making these types of decisions and these thought processes like the norm,
to tie to village operations.
Correct, yeah. For section 5 of business change, I like the idea of a set of tools and a framework as opposed to just guiding principles. I think we've seen with other projects, like the pedestrian plan, the kind of set of guiding principles doesn't really lead us to direct action as easily. And so I lean much more towards the framework side of things for section 5 as opposed to principles. For the thematic focuses in on page 5, which is section 6. You know, obviously, I know these are just initial thematic areas, but I want to make sure within this we're thinking about not just drinking water, but putting more waterways, you know, having that be, and biodiversity and how that all kind of relates, just to make sure that those are kind of also top of mind. I didn't see those too much in there. For section 7, the collective pledge, I am comfortable with putting it on an alternate timeline if that's where we are, but I think that this is essentially, this was a suggestion that you said was brought through the ECC, which is essentially our draft line to the residents and community. And so this is how we think that, you know, folks can get bought in. And we always talk about the idea of having people come along with us. You know, if this is really going to be resident-led with the ECC, I think that's a great place for it, and I think we need to listen and respond in time. So I am all for keeping this in, and think that this is a really great way of how we get the grassroots efforts of the community buy-in to do this with us. And who knows, you know, that may end up with some kind of benefits down the road as well. You know, it will mean that we might not have to impinge upon individual property rights as well. We're already getting property people side and those doing this on their own. So I think that that's a really valuable piece to have stake in there. And then I just have one more comment that I just really love the appendix. I love the idea that we're really getting detailed information on funding and budgets. And the metrics specifically, because again, you kind of want to know where you're getting the most bang for your buck, saying in a difficult year. And I think that this is a really nice clear representation of that. So I just wanted to say I appreciate the thought that went into this as well. So, that's it. Thank you.
And if you could, maybe just jump in. Thoughts on the definition?
Oh, yes. I actually really do. I like the definition. I think it's hugely improved what we had before. I think it incorporates not just, one of the concerns I had early on during that was the fact that it was very human focused and not focused on, you know, the natural environment. So I very much appreciate the fact that we all have that in here. I'm trying to figure out if we want to say just preserve resources or natural resources. I'm struggling with that. If we want to add that in or not, but I am really happy with kind of the way this came out.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understood that.
Yeah.
The phrasing, resources versus natural resources.
Yeah, because I know we have natural environment already, but, so it can feel redundant, but it's not, it's a little bit more specific. I can go either way, but I think that this is a huge one with this originally, so it is definitely took into account a lot of things that I have, so yeah, it's great.
Chris, run through it.
I just had a couple of questions. First, there was something in the presentation that talked about land and ethic. I'm not familiar with that concept.
Yeah. Great. Remember the first time I met you, I said I'm never going to sleep, I'll come and cry?
Yeah.
Land ethic was coined by a gentleman, Alan. A land ethic is a term coined by Alan Lehman, who was a conservationist from the early 1900s. And a land ethic takes into consideration the land, the water, the soil, the earth, the plants, the animals, and the humans. And we're all part of an ethic that says we want to protect all of this. We're all together, we're all a part of the environment. And so a land ethic is really, it's kind of the pledge, it's kind of the call to action, but it's essentially says all of these things make up our environment together, and they're all equally important, and they all have to be protected equally. You can't just pull one out and say, this is what I want to protect. I want to protect all of it together.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You mentioned too that there was a split between whether or not to include the pledge in the current plan or to separate that out. Any further?
Sure, yeah, so I think everybody agreed it was important as whether the sustainability plan made a recommendation to create a pledge, a community pledge, or whether the content of where that would be actually be within the sustainability plan. So there's support for the concept in general, and whether or not it is within the village sustainability plan.
It sounded like it was the reason to not include it was
necessarily. I think the idea that if we were to separate it, it could provide some flexibility there. I think in terms of the split, it's really about whether or not this should be, since it's the village's first sustainability plan, so then it focuses on the village as an organization versus something that really takes on and looks at the community holistically and calls it the action precedent.
Yeah, I think my thoughts are probably in line with Commissioner Stowski. If you get just in terms of I'd like to see it, maybe might in it included, but I think to get it right, I think it means we have to focus on the village operations and the village first, and I'm okay with that. But it's a pretty critical piece. We're not talking policy or the plan itself, but I can see the incentives being tied to some of that, but we can talk about that at another time.
Add my agreement to that.
Other than that, I think this is fantastic. I like the new definition. Act strategically struck me a little. At first, I think you sort of like plan strategically and act differently, but I think it's fine. I understand.
You got another word for us to
No,
consider?
I think it's fine. It's good. It's good.
I landed in the
Or
same spot.
intentionally?
Intentionally, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe
Okay.
intentionally?
Landed on that word too,
Yeah.
and I went, I think it's okay.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. But I think overall the outline is strong. I'm obviously very interested in see what fills in the spaces there, but I think it's good intentions or a good start. And I don't really have anything else. I think it's great. Looks good.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Tell me about how you landed on the 2, 10, and 20-year time horizons. The 2 makes sense because it kind of jives with our long-range planning cycles. How'd you get to 10 and 20? Why not 8 or 12 or what? Is there any magic to it?
So the 20 years is really kind of looking at the comprehensive plans on, it looks at a very similar kind of vision component or timeline. I think the idea that 10 years was kind of splitting the difference a little bit. I think that the amount of work that's going to go into drafting the plan, and if the objectives are stated correctly, they're not something that we're going to just achieve and turn around and say, oh, we're going to do this again. But also, I think if you go look at the technologies emerged in the last 10 years, and what it might look like 10 years from now, something that can get outdated pretty quickly. If you look at the GRC framework, that's about a 10-year time frame that was created, and there's some stuff in there that looks like it can be refreshed. So it was a matter of kind of trying to strike a balance between not going so far out that some things might not be relevant anymore, but not bringing it too close that you're going to be doing all this work all over again.
I just want to reiterate, the 20 aligns with the comp plan vision, and Jason was talking about slotting it in, right? The 2-year LRP, we're all used to that, again, slotting it in. I just wanted to add to that too. Remember that just like LRP, it's got a 3 to 5 year plus horizon, but we look at it every year. I think this is going to be an ongoing, living, reviewed document over and over. So 10, yeah, it's just trying to say it's a little bit out there, but it's always going to be reviewed by this group in the ECC.
You took the word that I was about to use. I think it strikes me as something that's a living document. Both because we're kind of creating it for the first time now and because of the advances that you just talked about. Things can move very quickly, and I think it's good to be able to react to them. And I think the 2-year window is something that is realistic. We do it all the time. And also having that sort of check-in annually, but also thinking in a broader scope. 10 may be a little too long for me. I might want it more like 5, but
yeah.
The basic structure of what we're looking at, I think, is very good.
Everybody okay if we just put like a range, 5 to 10? Like, because I don't think 10. There's like it's not like
yeah,
10.
There's nothing rigid about it. I'm not trying to be.
All right. I think we can live with 5 to 10.
The other part of it that jumped out to me was the community pledge, the collective pledge. And it was one of my favorite parts of the whole thing, because this obviously is very village focused. I think it's intended to be. It should be. But this is an opportunity, I think, to empower residents and bring them along on the journey. And highlight some of the things that are already going on in our community that a lot of people don't even know about. And that would go a long way toward building momentum toward some of the things that we're trying to accomplish overall. So I hope that this is something that we bring forward sooner rather than later. I hope it's not on an alternative timeline. I'd like to see it in this report with the idea that it's something that, along with the rest of the report, it's going to evolve. It's going to live like the rest of it. And hopefully grow a lot more interest and give us more opportunities to reach out into the community and educate and learn from things that other people do.
Mike?
Yeah, so I'm not going to repeat what's already been said. A couple things I had to comment on before I comment. I'll just say that I also agree with the definition, and I like how aspirational this is. I would say that in our evaluation of success, so the matrix sort of stuff that we were looking at, we shouldn't lose sight of the basic things too. So lighting, for instance, how well does it work, and how long does it last, right? So those things that were always part of the metric still remain part of the metric.
Sort of the Downers way, right? The oldest track and the functionality.
Exactly. So, and other than that, that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Can I circle? Greg, did you comment on the definition? We got any thoughts more on the?
I didn't, but I'm good.
Good with it? All right.
Danny, you still out there?
I'm still awake.
Are the kids?
What's Cameron think of this whole thing?
No, yeah, he's in the bathtub. But yeah, no, I'm good with the definition. I like everything about this looks pretty good to me. I was looking at the community pledge. I think that's a nice addition to try to entice residents to do their part as well. I'd like to see some type of education component in there. But yeah, no, I'm pretty good with this for the most part.
Great. About that definition, did you comment on that? You good on that?
Yes.
Dave, you keeping score up there?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. I had a couple of thoughts. I don't know if I like the definition. I don't know if this is the right place for it, but someplace I'd like to see us talking in big, broad, like vision statement kinds of terms about part of our goal is impact improvement. And maybe that's in there and I'm missing it, but we're going to set a baseline, and we want to know, and part of the decision making is ethically driven, part of it is best practice driven, but part of it we'd like to know we're targeting results that show the operation of the village is less of a negative impact than it was yesterday. So I don't know where that fits, but that didn't jump out at me as I read through it.
I think the measurable, right, was part of this. Is that what we meant by actionable and measurable?
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of a loop there, though, because when it's measurable, you can look at your successes and find out where you're having the highest ROI, and yeah.
So that's a perfect segue, Jason. Tell me a little bit more about so the picture in my head of the matrix portion is that there is this baseline definition, and then there's, whether it's annually or in conjunction with the LRP or whatever it is, but there's sort of a continuum of measurements so that 5 years or 10 years, whatever the number is, we look back and we have sort of a record of where we've come, right? How far we have come or not.
Yep.
So how do you see that the continuous measurement fitting into the structure of the document? Is that in the appendix, and the appendix kind of continues to grow over time, or what does that look like? I'd like to know that we're not only setting a baseline, but that we're forever then measuring against that,
Yeah.
you know?
That's a really good question, and I think in terms of, that would be something that we'll have to look at. I think in the 2-year action plans, you're really kind of focusing on measuring the impacts of, what have you done and how is that carried forward, but you're right, those actions are gonna have lasting impacts, something that we'll have to keep track of. I'll have to give some thought to that, but it would potentially be looking at updating your ECM or something similar to an ECM that has a kind of a comprehensive evaluation, probably not as frequently as every 2 years, but maybe something that is kind of in that 5 to 10 year window.
So Jason and I haven't talked, or the team hasn't talked about this, but I think there's some inspiration to be had from the long-range plan. Earlier tonight, Mary, you were talking about 20-year efforts, and the long-range plan is at a similar format for those years because we track the key indicators over a long period of time. We update them every year. I think that would be a pretty good way, and we'll take a cue from Jason on how to measure those things because they're both short-term and long-term. If we keep measuring them or every time we do an update, tying back to the existing conditions, I think it's similar to LRP and may get at the issue that the council's talking about.
If you can't measure it, you can't fix it, and there's a certain accountability thing. This council happens to be doing something right now, but the council in 8 years, should be continuing to improve on some things that we're talking about now. And I guess I just want to figure out a way to include that. And then the other subject that we've sort of all weighed in on is I lost it on my screen, but the community pledge. I'm gonna repeat my colleagues because I agree entirely with Greg here. That to me was, I don't want to say the most important, but the village is taking a deeper dive with more professional analysis. That's what the village is doing, but we've been doing a lot of good work. What we really need is to be somehow bringing the community into thinking this is important and helping them understand what actions might make sense. And to everybody's point that's been said a bunch of times, that changes, whether the technology changes or the need changes. And so if this is part of this as opposed to separate from it, then it's kind of going through that look that happens every time we do planning every couple of years, and so maybe it moves around too. For me, that was one of the most important parts, and I thought some that we should not be leaving out or putting on a different track. I just think it should be part of it. So, that's all I've got.
You had to jump in on one other thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that jumped out at me from the
John's dialing in, he's got it.
From space.
There it is.
Down from space.
That jumped out on me, or at me from the ECC minutes was the lack of a D99 rep. And I know that's something that we've had in the past. I'd like to see us jump on getting a D99 rep sooner rather than later.
So we hear you, and while we may not have it in formality, I'll tell you that Jason has been working so closely with folks at District 99, so they're not represented formally, but they sure are connected to this planning effort, so we'll follow up on that as well.
Great, because I think getting that youth voice involved is very important. I remember taking away several things from the youth rep that was on there many, many moons ago when I was on ECC. It's good input.
Our kids are pretty bright.
Chris?
Yeah, just a couple things that were spurred by the conversation. First, this idea of accountability. I don't know that there's anything in here that addresses sort of the corporate or the industrial accountability. So, the extreme case is Sterigenics in Willowbrook. And how do we as a village identify, make sure that those types of things don't happen? So that's just a thought I had that we haven't put, that wasn't in here. And then going back to the metrics thought, I just want to echo, I agree. I think there is it is very important that we also have some consistent metrics. And I don't know what those are. I assume you'll figure that part out, but just so that we can over time make sure we're able to easily evaluate from a council standpoint, from a staffing standpoint, the impact, or easily visualize that, whether that's some sort of dashboard, however you guys align it, but that is going to be important 2, 5, 10 years, 20 years from now. So establishing those down, and I know we can add and revise those, but it is the important trending data that I would want to make sure we're paying attention to. So I think, Mayor, that's sort of what you were getting at, or at least a piece, and I just want to echo my support on that. I think that's pretty critical.
It also could inform, this is totally made up, but for the purpose of example, if a council in 6 years is looking at, part of this is woven with the budgeting process and the planning process and frankly the election process, right? And so if some group of people looks back 6 years and sees something that just isn't moving, right? It may affect or inform those conversations about prioritization, because the idea is, clearly this is important, it's gonna be something we're all focused on. It also isn't the only thing, right? We're still gonna be making those choices about things we can and can't do, but if you see something that you decide is important that's not moving over time, maybe it informs those future prioritizations.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
From the staff perspective, this is the kind of work of the steering committee, diving into these details. I want to thank the council for your steering of the steering committee. I also really just want to acknowledge some folks that have done some great work here. Jason, Jay, and everybody on the ECC, I think you can see the quality of work that they're all capable of. So I wanted to call them out. Great work on the team. That's all we have, Mayor.
We do, our process is try and be inclusive of folks, and so we'd like to give everybody that's here tonight a chance to comment as well. If there are questions, realize please that this is super early draft, so maybe just we'll take notes and try and be sure they get answered. But if you're here tonight and have something you want to comment on this subject, please come onto the podium and tell us what's on your mind.
Excuse me, Diane Kasnick, 30-year resident of Downers Grove. I just love the fact that we're actually getting a sustainability project going, because it's been basically my life's work, even though it's not my work, it's what I've been looking for forever. So I appreciate that, and I would like to say one thing about, once you do get into the details, I'd love to see a little bit less business development and a little bit more habitat development, if I had to, prioritize. I mean, I know it's not as financially, and it's not financially the way that some people like it, but sometimes there's more to life than just money, and a nice, healthy community would be great. I mean, I love Downers Grove, love to see it even more sustainable. Thank you.
All right, people. I love the community pledge. I sat up straight and said, oh, yes, you're talking to me. I just think that's great, and I really suspect there's an appetite for this. I mean, I don't know if I'm a typical resident or not, but I think there's an appetite for this to get guidance on, what is real, meaningful action that we can take as residents. Every time I put my plastics in the recycling, and I know they're not really being recycled, it's just frustrating, and what can I do? I got my little compost thing and whatever. So, any guidance that comes both by setting example and by just direct, hey, incentives, great, I just need information. It is enough. Incentives are a bonus. And I think separating out, your big stereogenics, and there was a place they wanted to put an asphalt factory by Waterfall Glen or something, but also small businesses that, have similar impacts to homes versus the big businesses that are also having a big impact. So I think it's just wonderful. Nothing's perfect, but I think it's wonderful. So thank you.
I'll try not to repeat myself too much from stuff I've said in the past, but one thing occurred to me this evening based on the presentation that I would like to ask about, and if possible, have someone clarify. Is Downers Grove the physical space known as a village, or is there other terminology that applies? Because what occurred to me this evening, and part of where I think there may be a disconnect between some of the stuff I'm saying and the non-reaction that I'm getting from council, is that the presentation this evening looked to me like the word village was being used in two ways. One referring to the physical jurisdiction known as the Village of Downers Grove, and one referring to village government. And what strikes me from even what was presented this evening is that it's not always clear which is which, and that has a significant impact going forward. And I say that because it looked to me like you were referring to community as something other than village, in the sense that community is not village government. So it strikes me that what really needs to be clear in anything going forward here is that terms are clear in terms of village government versus village versus community. And that ties into why I keep hammering away at my disappointment with your definition. And I'll refer back to the comment I made last meeting, in which I brought up about this whole idea of reducing CO2 emissions by 50% by the year 2030, and how supposedly that's an objective of the members who are signed on to the GRC. That's only 6 years away. I don't know if the understanding of what that objective entails is intended to be understood by people like you as a reference to, oh, we've got to reduce our village government CO2 emissions by 50%, versus the idea that the village, meaning government and residents, and operations need to be reduced by 50% by 2030. That's a huge difference. And that also ties into some of the other things you're talking about in terms of policy versus modeling versus the approach you have. Because again, we're only 6 years away, and if you're serious about the village reducing emissions by 50%, that's within your 5 to 10 year time frame. I don't know if that's entered into any of the conversation yet, and whether it's going to enter into the outline. But I use that as a very specific example based on the fact that it was the subject of emissions was included in the existing conditions memorandum. But I didn't see any intent on the part of the outline to deal with that specific objective. And as you know, part of what I continue to be disappointed by is the fact that the definition has never spoken to the definition that I've put forward, which I'm taking from the people in ecological economics, where you use the word sustainable in a very specific way, consistent with what the word usually means, as opposed to what tends to be the way it shows up in political situations and was talked about here this evening. Namely, well, we're going to do something and we're going to do better than we did before, and that's going to be a success. Well, if you're trying to reach 50% reduction by the year 2030, that's not exactly, well, we'll try to get there and we'll see if we can bring the residents along kind of thing. If we were serious about it, which has been the problem all along at the international level, we're not serious about it. So I guess my hope against hope is that if Downers Grove wants to be a leader on this stuff, that it actually does begin to take these things seriously. Let me just comment again one more time about the definition. I have tried to point out in this context, you should be using, if you're going to have a proper definition, the definition is sustainable rate of resource usage. And then you get into what kind of resources are we talking about? Non-renewable resources and renewable resources. And that's why nobody wants to deal with this seriously. Because once you get into making that differentiation and you look at the way we live now, that's a huge challenge which so far nobody anywhere wants to undertake. But as I say, hope against hope, maybe Downers Grove will begin to have that conversation. Other than that, I guess I'll reserve comments for later. But please do explore this idea of just clearly differentiating between village government, the residents of Downers Grove, and the village space and what that means in terms of the use of that word, because I think that will help. It didn't occur to me until the presentation this evening that may be part of why I'm having trouble communicating with you about this stuff. Thank you.
I might say, I actually, when I forgot to mention, because I actually kind of touched on this too in my my review. And for instance, when we said buildings are the largest source of emissions in the community and village, I suspected that some people might get, so I think it would have been better to say private and public buildings are the largest source of emissions done, right? And then that, and so maybe reframing things in terms of public and private, I think is something that people might.
So this actually has come up quite a bit among the staff level team, because words mean different things to different people, and dialing in when we mean the village as an organization, meaning our operations, versus village government versus the people who live in our community in a geographic boundary. It's starting to take a little finer point. You saw it at Jason's presentation where he talked about, there was a slide that had some of this up there, and there was some sort of in a category that bridged between the two that Jason was talking about. So we're working on it. We got a little bit of work left to do because it can get confusing pretty quickly.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? I look for ways to be positive when I can. I could hear you very well, so thank you for the setup. I appreciate the fact that all of you have put in an extremely dedicated amount of time to review the materials and thought into them, and it's very impressive that you've done that, and I think I appreciate that. I take a minute to say that it's always risky to speak to power, because power always has the last word. And having been scolded a couple of times now, I want to say that nobody has ever said that things should not be nice, or that things should be left to deteriorate. And if taxes are low, that's good. That's your job. And it's not a license to spend money. And there can be disagreements about what value means. And so I will, and I've said it before, never question your motives. I think everybody here is well-intentioned and wants the best for the community. But the definition of community is also subject to interpretation. More people than fewer. What is the best value to more people? It's a little different perspective. So for that, I may get scolded again, but nobody said you shouldn't do your jobs, or that the outcome shouldn't be nice for the community. Thank you.
I think I've brought up before, I think we need to do something with trees and landscaping, and as I said, other communities around here, when you cut down trees, you get charged per the diameter of the tree you're cutting down. That's the penalty. They put that into a fund, and then they let the community take from that fund and plant trees of certain calibers. They get a reimbursement up to $599, so they don't have to pay a $10.99. I think we need to do that, and as more people are knocking down these smaller homes, getting rid of these trees, I think we need to implement something like, if you're gonna do this, we need, not flowers, but we need something to soak up this water. And you're building homes on the same package of a bigger capacity, and they're having a lot of water issues. So if you have a tree and it can drink up to, I don't know, 100 gallons of water, that really soaks that up and really will help with the water issue that we have. Also, last meeting, I was commenting on how we need to do better for the people who are on bikes and walking. And I mentioned Ogden Avenue, and I mentioned the bridge on Belmont going over, or Finley going over. But when I was talking to some of my customers, they were saying that coming from the Jewel, coming north on the east side of the street, the back of those people's houses are there. They have a lot of privacy fence, and that sidewalk also is never clear. And they have to walk on Main Street to get to their homes on the street because the sidewalks, we only get snow for so long, but it gets covered. And I think we have to look into something like that for our people that, do not drive and have to walk and have to get off the bus and go so many blocks down Ogden Avenue and other directions. In town here, we clean the streets for everybody. But there's a lot of places where, like that, somebody's not gonna go out to their, behind their backyard where they have a privacy fence and clear that area. So just a thought. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you all for being here. There's obviously lots more to come. I hope to see you all on these continued conversations. Just wanted to say that I think, Jason mentioned it before, so did Dave, but special thanks to our ECC. Boards and commissions are a subject that we always struggle with a little bit, but when we ask them for help, they always seem, regardless of which group it is, to step up. And so thank you for the ECC for doing the work they're doing, and please continue doing it. All right, anything else, council? Danny, you still with us?
I am.
Yes, he is.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Rosa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Davenport?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
And Mayor Burnett.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you all again. Have a good night.